Um, but yes, this is the Wi-Fi 6 talk, so please, without further ado, Jeanette Lee.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about Wi-Fi. Those of you who've been in my workshop here at MacTech know I talk a lot about Wi-Fi, but there's one particular thing I have not talked too much about, and that's this upcoming standard, well, I shouldn't say upcoming because it's out now, called Wi-Fi 6. And I thought it was so important and so interesting for you guys, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of questions from people if you aren't already getting them, that it seemed like it was worth it to have its own session, which is what I told Neil, so I'm going with that. All right, so I work for a company called Ruckus, and we were recently acquired by a company called CommScope. If you look for us over in the room there, in the break room there with all the vendors, you will see we're at a table that says CommScope, but we're Ruckus too. So just so you guys know that if you get a little confused by that. Anyway, talking about wireless, I think everybody here knows wireless is vitally important. Everybody is going wireless, and by going wireless, I don't just mean, yeah, I have stuff that has wireless capabilities and I use it sometimes. What I'm talking about specifically is people are using it and they're using it as their exclusive connection. Now, we've been talking about this for a long time, very long time. But I see it catching on much more than it was before. I mean, I've been to offices now, and probably some of you have them, or you've been there too, where it isn't even so much that, you know, we're wireless until we're not, and then there's a cable that we plug into. Some places don't even have the cable. They don't even have the patch. So it's wireless or it's nothing, baby, and off you go. Then again, there's a lot of devices out there that don't even have an option for a wired connection. So what are you going to do in that case, right? Even if you had a patch port, not going to help you. So it's becoming really important. It's becoming extremely important because it means everybody's mobile. And we knew that. Like I said, this shouldn't be too surprising to you, but I think what's really surprising is how quickly that adoption is happening, right? It used to be, I think this was about a couple years, right now, this is going out a couple years. Right now, if you ask people, are they 100% mobile? They're not wired, and in many cases, they aren't necessarily sitting at a desk every day. It's about a little over a third of people say that's where they are right now. If you talk about employers and some employees about where they expect they're going to be in 2021, so just 2 years from now, we're going to almost double, right? We're going to 53%. We're going over half are going to be there. Now, how are they going to do that? Can the wireless that they have today get them to where they want to go? And I think that's the most important thing. We tend to take wireless, I think, a little bit for granted. And that is kind of by design, because if it's done well, you shouldn't be thinking about it. And for those of you who are network engineers in this room, and many of you I see here, at least some I have had in my workshop, you darn well know that if you've done your job right, it shouldn't be something people think about. It should just work. And I work for Ruckus. We build wireless equipment. We build switches and wireless. And that's my motto. When I talk to people, there's 3 words I want them to say. It just works. That's what I really care about. I mean, yes, I like it if they like the dog, which is our mascot. I like it if they like me personally. That's even better. But what I really want is I just want them to come back and tell me it just works. I don't think about it. But these trends are going to change that a little bit, because you can't have all these devices coming into the wireless and expect that things are going to continue exactly the way they were. Not only I'm talking about, excuse me, not only am I talking about more people being on their wireless devices more often, but I'm also talking about just more devices. Because before it was a little bit easy to kind of say, okay, everybody here, yep, you're going to have a phone, at least one phone, maybe a second one, maybe one's personal, maybe one's for work. You're going to have a laptop. You might have a tablet. And that's probably pretty much it for devices that you will have. But now it's changed, right? The world has changed, and part of the reason it's changing is because of these 3 little words, which are not "it just works," it's Internet of Things, right? What are we going to do with all these devices out there? And again, like I said, those of you who have talked with me and maybe have been in my workshop have heard me talk about that. I appreciate that people really like IoT, and I see the benefits of it. My husband makes sure I see it because he's constantly buying IoT things for my house. I don't know why we needed a Wi-Fi enabled water sprinkler, but we have one, so, you know, Someday he'll tell me why that was necessary, but I have it. So there's a thing that's in my house. And you probably have some too. As a matter of fact, if you go and you talk to people, and I have, and you ask them, how many wireless things, or just network things in general, do you have in your house? It's changed a lot in the last 10 years. A lot of people I talk to might have had a dozen, maybe, devices, mostly tablets, iPads, phones, laptops. Maybe they had like Apple TV or something like that. Now it's quite different, right? We've got these Ring doorbells. We've got these Ecobee thermostats. We've got Nest cameras that might be Wi-Fi. People are just bringing out more and more applications. At one point, and this was, I think earlier this year, I was at another conference and I was talking about all the devices that you have, and I was kind of polling the audience a little bit, asking, how many devices do you have? Because I can tell you right now, at my house, I have about 50 at any given time that are on my network, which is, I don't really feel like I'm awash in stuff, but it's certainly a lot more than I had 10 or 15 years ago. And the prize, I had to give the prize to this one guy. He raised his hand and he said, I have 159 devices at my house. I was like, okay, good for you. And I think more of us are going to get there. And the reason is going to be IoT, because if you think about it, that's what it is, right? It's not a human device. It's not something that, like my phone, where I have to pick it up to interact with it. An IoT device might not be transmitting all the time, but it's always on, if you will, because essentially most of them are sensors, right? And a sensor is just there to generate data and to constantly be talking or have the capability of talking. And there's lots and lots of them. If any of you have been to the Apple campus, their new big mothership campus in Cupertino, you might have seen those vast swaths of grass and lawn around them. Somebody was telling me that they have these little IoT devices that are sprinkled throughout their yard, the lawn, to tell them how much water the grass is getting so that they can know if they need to get a little bit more or maybe back it off a little bit. And the whole idea being that, A, it keeps the grass green, because the grass is always greener on Apple's side, but also, it lets them be more energy and efficient, right? Because they won't be turning on the sprinklers and overwatering stuff. But that's a lot of devices. That's a lot of IoT thingies running around there. And that isn't even getting behind the walls of that building. People are very big into building these energy efficient buildings. You talk about these LEED compliant buildings that are out there. IoT is how a lot of them are going to get there, because they're going to be using that to measure and make sure that they're doing precisely what is needed to run operations and no more. So it's extremely important. So when I talk about mobility and I talk about people being mobile, I find it really important, but I also see in my mind IoT is kind of this other wave that's coming behind it. So what's the impact on wireless? Because I told you there would be. And I think it's worth it. I'm just going to take just about 2 minutes here to give you a quick little summary of where we've come in the world. So obviously, in the beginning, there was Wi-Fi, 1999. Actually, I think the standard came out in draft in 1998. And it came out and it was relatively slow, low performance. 802.11b was 11 megabits per second. Then we got B, then we got A, and we got G, so things got a little bit faster. Now this was primarily laptops and some phones. And then with 802.11g, you started seeing more phones coming out that were running this Wi-Fi standard, and that was a few years after that. Then, in 2009, we started shifting to 802.11n. And that one really started proliferating with wireless, because that was in 2009. It was just 10 years ago. It's hard to believe. It was 10 years ago that 802.11n was the state of the art for wireless. And now you really started seeing people jumping onto this, because this was pretty cool, and you really started seeing devices that didn't have a wired option. I mean, phones have always been that way, but now you're really starting to see these laptops and the tablets really getting in there, and they just don't have any other option. Then a few years after that, so about 6 years ago, we had 802.11ac. So this was an even bigger standard. Every one of these standards has introduced something pretty consistently, and that's always been faster speeds. So you went from 11 megabits per second with 802.11b, all the way up to 802.11ac, where at that point now we're talking gigabit speeds. We're talking data rates that could go over 1 gigabit per second. And generally, if you were just a couple, like a 2x2 or a 3-stream, then you were at least getting over 800 megabits per second. So that's a lot of speed. And I think in my mind, that's when we really started seeing these non-human devices, if you will, these non-personal, maybe that's a better word to say, these non-personal devices, which are typically IoT. That's when these really started jumping in on the bandwagon, partly because the wireless was really becoming cheap and ubiquitous, but also because the performance was better. And so if you're going to be running something like streaming video over the wireless, you wanted to have enough capacity to support that. Now, you might notice up here that I've been saying 802.11b, 802.11n, 802.11ac, but I've got these numbers next to this in parentheses here. And the reason for that is because something like 802.11b or AC or N or whatever, that's a IEEE name for a particular standard that they ratified and then vendors go out and are compliant with. Excuse me. But the Wi-Fi Alliance, if you haven't heard of them or aren't aware, wfa.org, Wi-Fi Alliance is a business that is set up in order to do interoperability testing. So basically what they'll say is, if you have a Wi-Fi certified sticker on your box of the product you're selling, what you're saying to everybody is you've gone through interoperability testing to ensure that you comply to those standards and you will work with other devices. Because I can tell you right now, I have absolutely found stuff that is on shelves that is being sold without a Wi-Fi certified sticker on it. Does it work with other Wi-Fi devices? Yeah, usually. But on the other hand, if you really want it to be guaranteed, it needs to go through WFA interoperability testing. And they, WFA, are the one who recently said, you know, this whole 802.11 dot thing is kind of confusing, and we don't really think people like having to say all those letters and numbers and things. We're going to boil it down to one number, because I guess they like LTE with everybody talking about 5G networks and 4G networks. And they decided, hey, we want to do it too. So the Wi-Fi Alliance is now referring to Wi-Fi technologies by an individual number. So it goes like this: Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, hence the name of my, why the name of this here is Wi-Fi 6 rather than 802.11ax, because Wi-Fi 6 goes more trippingly off the tongue. Now, they did technically go back to all the other standards and give them numbers too, because I guess they didn't want them to feel left out. But nobody goes around talking about Wi-Fi 3. I can tell you that right now. Nobody does. Not even me, not even the Wi-Fi Alliance, but the numbers are there. So if you see that for some reason, you see somebody talking about Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 4 or Wi-Fi 3, this is what they're talking about. So now there's Wi-Fi 6. And we've got all this stuff out there that needs to be connected. What are we going to do with it? This is the newest standard. It just recently came out. Products are shipping. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you, well, nothing's really shipping for Wi-Fi 6, but that has changed. Now we have devices, right? The latest iPhone, the iPhone 11, is Wi-Fi 6, supports it in the chipset. Other devices like the Samsung Galaxy S10 supports it. There are laptops now that you can buy on the market. The Dell Latitudes and some of the HPs, and I think there's an Asus or two out there that support it. I'm pretty sure, I'm actually hoping, because this is my business, that the next spin of MacBooks and Minis from Apple are going to be Wi-Fi 6 as well. I think the chances are really good of that, but you know, we'll see. It's up to them what they want to do with it. And of course, you know, we have our own Wi-Fi 6 AP. So this is where you go ooh and ah. You see this? Ah, there you go. Thank you. That makes me feel really good. There's nothing I like better than fondling my own APs. So the reason I want to show you, it's true, actually. I'm a really sad person sometimes. But it's important, and actually, you know, we're pretty proud of it at Ruckus. We build this technology, we believe in it very strongly because we think that everybody is becoming reliant on it, and it has to work. It has to just work. Those three words that I like to talk about. And we're particularly proud of this AP, which, by the way, we're raffling 2 of those, so you will have a chance to get these Friday. This is the R750. It is a 4x4 4-stream Wi-Fi 6 AP. It's got a built-in radio in it as well, so you could do BLE and Zigbee devices connecting to it. And the thing about this is it's the first Wi-Fi 6 certified AP that shipped. And part of the reason why it was is because when the Wi-Fi Alliance does certification, they have what they call an interoperability test bed. And all the vendors, including manufacturers like Ruckus, but also people like Broadcom and Intel, and all those guys, they show up there with all their gear and they plug it in and they make sure everybody connects. Now, when they do the official certification, they have to pick a device that everybody connects to. So guess what was the interoperability test bed? It was this AP. So that's why we were the first certified, because clearly we interoperate with ourselves. But if you talk to anybody else out there who did the Wi-Fi certification, they had to do interoperability on our AP. And we are the only AP vendor that's in the interoperability test bed. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, enough on this. Let's move on here. So as I said before, the focus for Wi-Fi all along here has been on increasing speed, more speed, right? We went from minuscule speeds with 802.11b, but hey, it was wireless, right? So that was cool. Getting all the way up to Wi-Fi 5, 802.11ac, right? Getting up into these speeds. And now we've got Wi-Fi 6. And is it faster? Yeah, I mean, it is. Is it monstrously faster than Wi-Fi 5? No, not really. Is it going to make a difference on your devices? Yeah, you'll probably see a little bit of a performance hit, but it's not going to be huge. But that's not the point. And that's why I think it's extremely important that all of you come here and listen to this and get a little educated on this so you can talk to people about why this is important. Because it's not going to be because you're going to go out and tell somebody, hey, you can now do 2 gigabits per second. That's not why it's here. That's not why we built it. What we built it for is this: density. Lots of buildings with lots of people, with lots of stuff, lots of devices, trying to do all kinds of things. This is what matters. It's not just about the speed, it's about capacity. It's about how many devices can I connect? How many applications can I enable? Because if you think about it, most of the bandwidth that a device consumes is not terribly huge. Although we always talk about getting faster and faster internet at home, and there's gigabit fiber to the home and all that kind of stuff, the average speed that a device requires is about 70, 80 megabits per second. I mean, that's actually pushing it quite a bit, I think. Generally speaking, people could get by with a lot less. What they can't get by with, however, is an inability to get on the network when they need to, and the ability to transmit when they need to. And when you have all those devices out there, that becomes really important. If you've taken my workshop, or if you just are a RF or Wi-Fi engineer in general, you know that what I'm about to say is true, which is Wi-Fi in general, there's a small caveat, and I'll explain why in a moment. Wi-Fi is a half duplex technology. What does that mean? It means that only one device talks at a time on a channel. So I am the AP talking to all of you. I get to talk, none of you get to talk. In an 802.11, if we were all 802.11 compliant devices, you would hear me talking and you would be quiet. And when I'm done talking, then one of you lucky people out there could talk if you really wanted to. And that's how it goes. You can't have multiple people talking at the same time. It's a lot like a walkie-talkie, another wireless half-duplex technology, right? You can talk, say over and out, the next person jumps in, but if 2 people try talking at the same time, it's just garbage. And then we have to just dump the conversation and retry all over again. And that's actually pretty hard, and it's tough. And again, if you go back to thinking about these buildings, these hundreds, thousands of devices in these bigger buildings, what are you going to do? Because you've got all of them and they all want to talk. And there's only so much spectrum, there's only so much RF that we're allocated for Wi-Fi that we're allowed to transmit on. So this is not a pretty picture. It used to be that I would talk up 802.11ac, Wi-Fi 5. I would talk it up all the time to people going, yeah, it's got faster speeds, and we've got this 5 gigahertz spectrum, which is pretty clean, and nobody's using it. Yeah, everybody's using it now, so it's not really a panacea. So we had to do something else, and that's what Wi-Fi 6 is all about. So let me talk a little bit about what it is, since I've told you what Wi-Fi 6 is not. The big focus of this is greater network capacity. It's being able to have more devices connected and have more devices talking than we could before. And that's, of course, given we still have the nature of RF. It is still this half-duplex technology, but there's ways of pushing the boundaries a bit more and kind of squeaking a little bit more, eking a little more performance, a little more capacity out of the network. Here's something that's exciting for everybody. Who would like better battery life, right? Yeah, exactly. Woo! I would too. We've all seen, you know, the little red icon of our battery almost dead and been just about cried, right? How about if the Wi-Fi technology could make your battery last longer? Because it absolutely can. There's a direct correlation. Some of you probably know, maybe most of you do. There's a direct correlation between how fast your battery lasts and how much you're using the wireless, because it consumes power, and quite a bit actually, depending on what you're trying to do. So if we're going to have more devices, then we need this. And by the way, if we're going to have more IoT, we need this too. Because a lot of these IoT sensors that I was talking about, many of them are running on batteries. We're talking about things like IoT, you know, connected entry, which are these door sensors that can unlock and lock doors. They run on batteries. They're not running power at every door in a building. Those are batteries, baby. All that other stuff. And if you put them out there and they're going to run dead in about a year, that's not a very good investment, because now you have to have someone going along replacing batteries. And I can't think of something that would probably drive me insane more than going to an apartment building and replacing every door, a battery at every door, every year. Maybe people would like it. I don't know. Some days the office is really crazy, and actually I think that would be a good career choice. But generally speaking, it's not something I think I would enjoy. Anyway, another thing, coexistence. We all want to get along, right? But in particular, we know that every device that transmits, like I said, is transmitting on one of a limited array of channels that we can use to transmit. And the more devices we have on the same channel, the more of a problem we have, because that's that half duplex, right? That if I have lots of devices trying to talk at the same time on the same channel, that's a problem. If I have two APs on the same channel and they can hear each other and all their clients can hear each other, guess what? Only one of them gets to talk. So you bought two APs, but you're only getting one of them in use at a time. And that's kind of sucky, right? So again, if we're going for capacity, we have to figure out a way to get more devices talking at the same time without exceeding the limits of what we're allowed to do by our friends at the FCC. Another thing is, we do want to get faster, but not faster in terms of just raw absolute numbers. What I really want here is I want to have better peak throughput, right? Just on average, what am I capable of transmitting without hogging up all the bandwidth? That's really what I'm talking about here, which is, if you think about it, a much more practical way of looking at networking and looking at how we're connecting to a wireless network than just going, I can do 800 megabits per second, because, you know, how often do you need that? I'm sure some of you here probably do need it, but generally speaking, I don't really need it. And I say this as a network engineer. Another thing is greater outdoor reliability. As most of you know, there are more and more smart city initiatives happening where you have these downtown projects where they're renovating downtowns areas and they're putting in more Wi-Fi. We used to talk about city Wi-Fi or municipal Wi-Fi back in the early 2000s, and nothing really came of it. But now the cities are starting to see how they can actually put their own IoT devices like parking sensors and, you know, gas meters and things like that. Those can all be enabled using a wireless network, and hey, it makes it better for the rest of us. I don't know, how many people have been to New York City and used those Link kiosks that have Wi-Fi on them? Has anyone tried those things? No? If you go to New York City, you'll see that in Manhattan, in large parts of Manhattan now, every couple of blocks or so, they have these big kiosks. They're called Link NYC. And they are these kiosks that have maps and you can look at stuff. And they have access points in them, ruckus access points. But they have these access points in them so you could be wandering around Manhattan and getting on Wi-Fi for free, because they offer that as that speed. And they have gigabit connections to each of those kiosks because they see the value of it. So you need that outdoor reliability. That's important too. All right, so let's jump into, I'm gonna get a little technical here. Hang in with me if you have questions. You know, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end, or you can come find me and we'll talk about it more. So what is so great about Wi-Fi 6? One of the key technologies of Wi-Fi 6 is something called OFDMA. Now, that's orthogonal frequency, excuse me, division multiple access. There's no quiz, you don't have to remember that. All you have to remember is that up until today, Wi-Fi was using typically OFDM as our frequency modulation on the wireless. With Wi-Fi 6, we're moving to OFDMA. We're doing that because it's going to enable a lot of other things that we couldn't do with the existing technology. And by the way, OFDMA is what most of your cell phones are using. So we're moving to this, which is a much more efficient way of transmitting data. So what does it do that's really, really cool? There's a couple things that it does. I don't know if I have a laser and pointer, and I'm afraid to press this button because it was doing weird things. Okay. What it does is, if you look at that block there, that beautiful block where it says OFDMA, you can see there are these columns of time and the frequency, because all these channels I talked about actually have these little sub-frequencies in them that we call carriers. And you could transmit on one of these. So I would have the blue team transmitting, the green team transmitting, and the purple team transmitting, and the dark blue transmitting. And each of these could be a different device. But they all get that block, that column, that is dedicated just to them to transmit. But what if they don't need all that space? What if they're not transmitting all the time on that channel? Can I reuse it? Can I do something with it? So answer is yes. If you look at the right-hand side there where it says OFDMA, you can see what happens is I can actually start taking it when somebody needs to transmit, but they don't have enough of their what would be allocated to them in OFDM, but somebody else isn't using all theirs. I could take some of their time slot to transmit. So I'm packing things in, I'm making things denser, and that's actually really cool. That's what's going to get me from supporting, a couple dozen devices in a home to maybe hundreds. This is what I have to do to make this happen. So what does that mean? Like I said, one way of thinking about this is before we just had this one-lane road. It was one lane. It could be a really big lane, maybe it was, but it was just one lane. Now with OFDMA, think of it as lots of lanes that I can have lots of cars driving down. Or if you want to think about it another way, think about it when I was using that capacity thing of being able to pack things in really tight. So for example, think of this as, here's my truck with all the stuff I want to deliver, right? That's good. The truck is mostly full. But with OFDMA, I could pack it all the way to the top. It might be going somewhere else, might not all be going to one destination. Maybe the truck's going to stop and drop off some box along the way, but I packed that full. And I can guarantee you that smart companies like Amazon are absolutely doing this for their deliveries. So you can see how this concept works all across life in all different kinds of applications. So this is really important. And about that battery, I told you guys about that battery life. Clearly this is an issue. If we're going to be more mobile, if we're going to be on our wireless more, we care about battery life. So with Wi-Fi 6, there was some testing that was done where they used just a kind of mixed use case. They did some video, they did some email, they did some web browsing, and they wanted to see how much Wi-Fi 6 would enable the battery life. And they got about an extra hour. So, and this was using a Google Pixel, in case you're interested. I know it's hard to see in there. But what they saw is, in general, on average, this is the benefit they were getting from running base on a Wi-Fi 6 AP versus a Wi-Fi 5. I think it was a 5 that they used. So that's pretty big. And that's using a feature in Wi-Fi 6 called target wait time. So what that allows is it allows a AP and a device to agree that I'm going to let you sleep for a good long time, and we both agree that when you wake up, if there's any data, I'll have it for you. But it lets them sleep a lot longer, and that's what conserves the battery. So that's extremely important. What would you do with an extra hour? If you like Game of Thrones, maybe you could think of it as all these different people or all my different Wi-Fi technologies that I had out here, and then there's that extra hour, which is the dragon, right? Takes everything. I guess I just like Game of Thrones. Okay, nobody laughed. Okay, there you laughed, that's good. Now I'm happy. Everybody likes the dragon. I like the dragon. I was sad when the one dragon died. That was traumatizing for me. Okay, what else does Wi-Fi 6 do for me? Multi-user Mimo. I was talking with a couple people out in that break area, and they were talking about it too. So Wi-Fi 6, now this is a technology that's been around for a little while. I should step back for a moment. AC, 802.11ac, Wi-Fi 5 also does multi-user Mimo. But with 6, we're trying to do more. And here's one of the things that it does, is with Wi-Fi 6, I have the ability now to have an AP send data to up to 8 devices at the same time. So remember how I said half duplex, one device talking at a time? This is how I get around that a little bit. Instead of it just being a one-to-one AP talking to one of you, it's kind of like what I'm doing right here, right? Where I can send to all of you, except I'd be able to have individual conversations with up to 8 of you. That's what it means. And I could be saying different things to all of you. So you can see how that really ups the densification capabilities here. Because remember, Wi-Fi 6 is about capacity, not about speed, ultimate absolute speed. So this is a very good thing. Here's something else Wi-Fi 6 people will get, Wi-Fi devices. You will get more spectrum, right? So what does that mean? I told you there was a limited amount of spectrum, and there absolutely is. FCC regulates what spectrum, which frequencies Wi-Fi devices are allowed to transmit on. And the FCC is in the process of ratifying and opening up a swath of new spectrum. I think it's a little over gig, actually, of megahertz of spectrum that they will have available. It's the 6 gigahertz spectrum, if you've seen it or heard about it. But guess what? They're only going to let Wi-Fi 6 devices use it. Yes, exactly. So I told you there was a reason why you might want Wi-Fi 6, even if you're not sure you want it. Here's the reason why you want it. You're running a Wi-Fi network somewhere where there's lots of other Wi-Fi devices, which should be every single one of you, and it's getting really crowded. You know, you're feeling like there's all these networks around here that are trying to talk on top of me, and I can't talk over them. You go to Wi-Fi 6, you're going to get a lot more spectrum. There'll be a lot less devices out there that are going to be competing with you and contending for the airtime just like you. So this is another reason to see the goodness. Yes?
Will there be a difference in penetration?
Yes. So if you didn't hear, he said, will there be a difference in penetration or propagation with the 6 gigahertz? Yes, there will, because generally the higher you go in the frequency, the lower the penetration. It won't, the signal won't travel as far, and it attenuates and drops in strength faster. Although the difference between 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz is maybe not like huge, but also keep in mind, Wi-Fi 6 is really intended for capacity, so really dense networks. And generally speaking, the problem usually isn't how far away you are from an AP, because there's usually tons of APs around. It's how busy is the AP. So it's really aimed at that. So if you have a very dense network, this is the thing for you. But yeah, if you're outdoor and you really just need something to go way far away, maybe Wi-Fi 6 isn't going to be the best option for you. It just depends. Lots of things about RF are like that. It just depends. If you've taken my workshop, you know I've said that. And if I've trained you well, you walk out of there saying, what did you learn today? It depends. Right? And then I go, yes. Okay. So probably one of the biggest reasons to go with Wi-Fi 6 in my mind and to be early is because you will be the first one to get onto this wonderful swath of spectrum. So just to kind of go back and recap a little bit, I haven't talked about every big piece of Wi-Fi 6, but I covered the ones that I think are the most important. So the OFDMA is an enabler for a lot of the things that I'm talking about. Multi-user Mimo, also around network capacity, getting more devices that can actually get data at the same time, extremely important. Power efficiencies, making those batteries last longer because God knows we need them. Also, a couple other things I didn't talk about so much was things like a higher QAM, 1024 QAM. This is, if you've been in my workshop, I've gone through this with you. If you're not as familiar with it, don't worry so much. Just think about this as the ability to kind of pack data more densely when I transmit it, is kind of what I'm talking about there with 1024. The longer OFDM symbol, this is more just for outdoors where I kind of need to send stuff at a long distance. And giving myself a little bit more reliability when I transmit is good because the outdoor is actually terrible for Wi-Fi. It's a really challenging environment, much harder than doing indoors. And then there's this other thing called Bss Coloring. Again, this is around network capacity and coexistence, and really what this is just having, if I have two APs that are on the same channel, so normally, I told you, half duplex, only one of them gets to transmit or one of their clients gets to transmit at a time and the other one has to be quiet. This whole concept of Bss Coloring actually allows the possibility that you might be able to have them both transmitting at the same time if they're far enough apart and how their frequencies are overlapping with each other. There's a possibility they could do that. So that's another piece that it does. And it's an extremely important one. But like I said, it gets pretty esoteric. If you want to talk about more, come find me, we can talk about it. But all these pieces together, these are the big pieces of Wi-Fi 6 and why it becomes really important. Now, of course, everything I've said here, Wi-Fi 6 is absolutely backwards compatible. So if you have other devices, Wi-Fi 5, 4, 3, God help you if you're on 3 or 802.11b, I'm really sorry. But if you have all those devices, it is absolutely backwards compatible with them too. And here's another cool thing, which I didn't really put on any of my slides. If you remember 802.11ac, one of the things people got really excited about with it is that it was a 5 gigahertz only technology. 6 is both. 6 can run on 2.4 gigahertz radios and on 5 gigahertz, and 6, apparently, soon. So you get a lot more options. And actually, I think that's really important because most IoT is probably going to do best on 2.4 gigahertz because that does give you the longer distance. So we really need to up the capacity of 2.4, and this is how we're going to do it. Now, other things to keep in mind. Backhaul, right? If we're getting more dense data and we're getting some pretty good peak throughput and we're upping everything, what about the backhaul? Do we want to stick with 1 gig coming out of the back of that AP? Probably not. So if you aren't already doing it, you might want to start thinking about upping the game the next time it comes around to upgrade your wireless or your wired switches. Wireless switches, there's a thought. Wired switches. You know, instead of 1 gig, you might start thinking about 2.5 gigabit or even maybe 5 gigabit or higher than that. The AP I just showed you there is 1, 2.5, and 5 gigabit, so you could plug any of those into the back of it. And obviously that gives you a bigger pipe. So something to think about there too. It's very important. What else? Power. So of course most people, at least in a commercial environment, when they run the APs, they'll run them using the power over Ethernet standard. So we're actually sending power over some of the pairs of wires in the cable. Some are data, some are power. And as you get these newer capability APs that are doing a lot more, then typically they're going to consume more power. So make sure that any switches that you have or any PoE injectors that you're using are capable of putting out and producing that higher power that these devices are going to require. It isn't that they won't work on the lower power standards on 802.3AF instead of 8AT. They'll work on AF, but what you'll see is they're just going to have to step back some of the capabilities. They're going to have to step down the power that the APs can transmit on. Maybe they have to shut off that extra port or something like that, but they will run on the lower power. But if you want everything, you're going to want that higher power, generally speaking. And of course, like I said, devices are coming, right? We've got the phones that are coming out. We've got more. We've got a bunch of laptops that are already shipping. A lot of the next generation processors are going to natively support Wi-Fi 6. So you're going to see that in this coming year, 2020, I'm really excited. You're going to see a lot of devices out there. And also there are other things that are kind of pushing things that I think will accelerate this. Like for example, if you're following things like the Wi-Fi security, there's this encryption standard that Wi-Fi uses called WPA2. It's used for pre-shared keys and also for 802.1x networks. And there were vulnerabilities that were found in it. So they decided to go out and create a new encryption standard called WPA3. So what I'm seeing now is and since that generally will work better with new hardware because you can make it more efficient to operate, what I'm seeing is they're going to be shipping everything. So you'll get Wi-Fi 6, you'll get the capability to run WPA3 natively, and so it's just all around going to be better for these devices. And you'll be able to do higher capacity with them too. So there's a lot of reasons to really like Wi-Fi 6. Does this mean you should go out and replace all your laptops or all your phones or anything like that? Well, I'm sure all those vendors would really appreciate it. But on the other hand, you know, they're going to get there one way or another. You're going to get there in a couple years. It really doesn't matter what you do. Just general natural selection is going to move everything over to this new standard. But if it's time to upgrade your Wi-Fi before then, I would strongly encourage you to consider Wi-Fi 6 simply because then you'll be positioned to really take advantage of this as the devices come out. Because the more of them there are, the better it is, clearly. So what does that mean? It has a lot of other things that it helps, but specifically places that require a lot of capacity are really going to benefit. So you've got things like stadiums, right? These are obvious places where this kind of capacity is really going to help. Or schools, another very dense environment. It's a very challenging environment from a wireless perspective. They're definitely going to be taking advantage of this because they desperately need that kind of performance, that kind of capacity, and they're trying to reduce their complexity to make this just simple to work and reliable. And of course, I showed you the AP, so our R750. 2 of you will get an AP, so yay for you. I'm rooting for every single one of you. And basically, this is where we are, right? This is where we want to go, is having that high, not even capacity, but I would even say high capability, right? I want to have all the speed. I want to have better coverage. There's a little bit of better coverage. I didn't talk about it much, but there is better coverage. I want to have more capacity, always, be able to support new applications, right? Reduce my power consumption, and have more active devices transmitting everywhere wirelessly, because that's where we're going, and that's where we need to be. So that is the Wi-Fi 6. Now I'm going to take a couple minutes and tell you guys about something. It's really near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to do a small commercial here for you guys. Has anybody ever heard of an organization called ITDRC? The Information Technology Disaster Recovery Center, I think it's called, something like that. We work with them. Ruckus is a partner of this. This is a nonprofit group, a volunteer organization of IT professionals who go out and they basically team up with FEMA. So whenever something like Hurricane Harvey happens or what we've been seeing with Dorian happens, they're basically rolling right behind the FEMA trucks, helping out with getting these areas set up with networking again, because obviously networking is so important, right? They work with Dish as one of the vendors. They donate equipment so they can get satellite uplinks getting back out to civilization. Kids can go back to school and be doing their classwork because they are so internet intensive. Businesses can start getting back online. It's really important. There's a lot of different organizations that help, and I just wanted to take a few minutes and make you guys aware of it if you didn't know about it. If you're interested in volunteering and supporting them, I think it's an excellent group of guys. You'll learn a lot. Obviously, when it comes to this, you know, there's a lot of vendors who participate. We have volunteers who get deployed. We also can help in the back, you know, on the back end, just with remotely supporting their operations. They also teamed up with a group called Team Rubicon, which is a bunch of US veterans who then these are people who have been trained so that they can go in directly after a disaster, and they're trained to deal with rather dangerous situations that maybe your average IT person is not trained to deal with, you know, dangerous chemical spills or something like that. They would do that. The World Kitchen comes in as well to help feed. So it's a whole group. And with Dorian, this group has actually gone international. So now it hit the Bahamas. They've been out there deployed in the Bahamas. If you've seen the pictures, I mean, it's terrible. That was a police station, right? There was a joke someone told me about. They said, people would say, well, you know, you don't have to worry so much about a hurricane wind because it's just wind, you know, and I think I agree. The wind itself maybe isn't the problem, but when it sends a Hummer through your wall, that's a problem, right? Because that's exactly what that is. It's a Hummer that the wind picked up and threw through it, so it's a real issue. Even if you've never lived somewhere with hurricanes, I think everybody here has been somewhere where there is the potential of a natural disaster. A lot of you live here in California, as I do, so you're aware we do have things like wildfires, and ITDRC has been involved in those as well. I think they're still deployed to some degree up in Northern California, where some of the Camp Fire and some of the other fires happened very recently. So they're still out there helping. And if you do decide to join up and you do decide to deploy, we have these wonderful accommodations for you, these tents. They sleep you and 7 of your best friends. You can get your food. So, you know, we're taking care of you guys. Lots out there to do. You will learn a lot. So if you are interested in it, I do recommend that you go check it out. Go to their website. Really good people. And, you know, they're just out there trying to help other people who are in a bad shape, in a bad spot. So it looks like I have a couple minutes for questions here. But I did want to answer a question that a couple people have asked me, because they've said, well, you're CommScope now, what does that mean? We still got the dog. So, okay, so if anyone has any questions, I do have a couple minutes. It can be on Wi-Fi 6, it could be on ITDRC, it could be on something else, but I might make up my answer on those.
So you said that the Wi-Fi 6 works at 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz 6 when the FCC opens it up?
Correct.
Does your product have a deactivated 6 gigahertz radio in it, waiting for that for a software update?
You asked me that, and I have to double check. I think so. I'm going to say I think so, but I should probably double check with engineering, because I know we were looking at it, because generally what happens is when you put these radios in the APs, depending on which radio you get, they can be fairly tunable. So they can be tuned beyond the frequency that normally we would be using. I think this one does, but I wouldn't want to double check. But it's an excellent question. Other questions on it? Yes?
The range of Wi-Fi 6 versus 5, does it basically depend upon the frequency band you're using? Is it
On the what?
on the band you're using, so if you're using 5 gig, it's going to be the same for Wi-Fi 5 as Wi-Fi
Yeah,
6?
so that it is a good question. Obviously, the frequency, 2.4 versus 5 versus 6, is the biggest factor as far as how far a signal is going to propagate and how well it's going to penetrate walls and trees and people, things like that. But in general, I would say it's about the same indoors. Outdoor, I think, is where they're trying to make the best improvement on it. Yes?
So kind of on that same topic, one of our main challenges with some of our customers is we cater to a lot of resorts that have cabins quite a ways away from each other, and the outdoors is always a factor. Well, we live in northern Minnesota, so we get pretty cold temperatures too. So, but mainly we're catering to them in the summer. They only have seasonal operation typically. So we're trying to find a good solution that can withstand the temperatures, just so they don't have to winterize them and take them down, but also to have the range to reach the cabins and things that are kind of distances apart. So do you think the Wi-Fi 6 is better, or the Wi-Fi 5 in that situation?
I think you will have better bet on the outdoor, particularly on the 2.4 radio, will probably be your best bet for that. Because you didn't, I think, say it necessarily, but I'm assuming these are all in woods, surrounded by trees, which are terrible for Wi-Fi, because those trees just soak up the Wi-Fi really, really well, unfortunately. And 2.4, the lower frequency, is going to be your best bet anyway to get through those. So yeah, I do think Wi-Fi 6 will give you some advantages there, which will help. But also just that natural capacity, that extra capacity, packing things tightly and more efficiently will help, because then even if you're getting a relatively poor signal, it'll be more efficient. So I do think that will be a big help. Other questions? Yes?
I have an obtuse question, because we live in a 1 acre section with very few houses around us, and I'm thinking from what you say, we'd be better to stick with AC.
Because of, I'm sorry, what was the first part?
Well, we don't want interference from other participating Wi-Fi stations. So if we don't see them on our network, and we know who they are, then we're better off to stay with probably a less extensive...
If you know who they are, the other people transmitting.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you know who they are, then yeah, you could do some coordination, right? So, I mean, I could see that could work for you, because maybe if you don't need that extra capacity,
That's true.
then the coordination maybe isn't going to be as important to you.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that Wi-Fi 6 is the panacea that will solve all your problems, although maybe it sort of sounded like it did. It solves my problems of a paycheck if you buy it. But I mean, I think it's a good point, right? Which is, and this is something that I stress to the people who take my workshops, is I always tell them, understand your environment, understand your applications, understand what you're trying to do. Because you don't need to overbuild your network, but if you're going to upgrade anyway, I'll give you some options. But if it sounds like maybe you don't need that so much, I wouldn't worry about it. Yes?
Do you feel like you guys are basically chasing the demand with the, with the different, coming out with new access points and the standards and things like that, or are you staying ahead of it?
I would say that we're ahead of it right now, and that's really, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a little bit of a balancing game here and a balancing act of trying to get the standard out before people absolutely are desperate for it, versus getting it out only after people were standing out in the streets and rioting, going, my phone died and I missed the ending of, the last episode of Game of Thrones or something like that. So, yeah, there's a little bit of that game, but it's also a little bit of a push-pull, right? Because I can start shipping APs, but I need the clients to really make all that happen. And people like Apple and Samsung aren't going to really get up and decide they're going to go start adding that capability until there's networks they can connect. So it's kind of a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of thing. All right. I think we're at the end of our time. So thank you so much for your attention, and we will be at our table. Come find us. It says CommScope, but we're still Ruckus. We got the dog. Thanks, everyone.